Hey everyone, welcome to the latest Impact on Optometry show with my special guest, Dr. Harbir Sian. I'm your host, Dr. Sandy Eveleth, and I'd love to hear from you if you're live with us today or watching during the replay. Please drop a note in the comments to ask us a question or simply let us know how you're doing. So let me introduce this eye care rock star, Dr. Harbir Sian. Harbir is the co-owner of 2 optometric practices in the Vancouver, Canada area. Throughout his career, Harbir has always looked for ways to educate and give back. He's volunteered in multiple vision clinics, both locally and globally. Harbir is on the board of the Eyeglasses Project, sorry about that, and is the executive director of the Lensbox Foundation. Harbir is also the host of the 2020 podcast, a show that shares insights from people in various industries, including doctors, athletes, and entrepreneurs. Harbir, I reached out to you and connected with you on LinkedIn back in 2019 because I was so impressed with how much you were showing up online and sharing generously information to help your colleagues and patients succeed and excel in their own lives. I've been loving your latest 30-second eye doc spots where you share eye care tips inside, a 30-second time frame. I'm amazed how much you can pack into that short period, and I'm loving the guest spots you've included. Those are awesome.
Thank you.
I'm also excited. You're welcome. I'm excited to share a very important milestone with your podcast, the 2020 podcast. Here we go. You've hit your 50th episode, and wow, what a topic and special guest you had on your show. For those that don't know, you cover, as I mentioned, a wide array of topics, and for this particular episode, it was powerful, entitled Perseverance, Racism, and Faith. You interview a special guest and discuss his journey as an amazing play-by-play hockey commentator. So I have to ask, how do you do it all? And as part of your answer, please feel free to dive deeper into all of these things that we mentioned, all of these things that we mentioned.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. And
Of course.
yeah, where do I start? How do I do it all is an interesting question. I do get asked that quite a lot. And I feel almost like I don't really know how to answer it because I don't necessarily always feel like I'm doing that much. I think it sometimes because we were just talking about this off, before off air. We're just like, sometimes people will be like, you're always showing up on my feed. And, I'm always in people's faces, I guess, so that it feels like maybe I'm doing a lot of different things, but it's just, maybe it's a little bit of professional ADD or whatever you might want to call it, where I see something and I feel like that seems like a good idea, and I just sort of just go for it. I don't have a lot of inhibition or filters when I see an idea or something that seems like a good idea to me. I might think about it for a little while and then I'll just try it. So there's a bunch of stuff you haven't ever seen, but I've tried, or there's stuff I tried before that didn't go so well, so I stopped doing it. The things you're seeing are some of the things that kind of stuck, like the podcast and the 30-second eye doc videos. That was I was seeing specifically on that one. I was seeing that doing my own little bit of market research. I was seeing that the reels, I think we all saw it, reels on Instagram were blowing up, and we're getting tens of thousands, if not potentially millions of views for the certain people who are doing them. And I wasn't the type of person to do like TikTok videos and like a singing and dancing. Nothing against people who do that kind of stuff, but like personally, that wasn't my vibe. And I've always, like you said in the intro there, my passion is education, and trying to give back to people in a sort of a constructive way. So I was like, okay, how do I combine education with the reels? And so the 30-second eye doc concept came up, and the name says it all. You kind of see when you hear 30-second eye doc, you're like, okay, in 30 seconds, I'm going to see it. For 30 seconds, I'm going to see an eye doctor. And I try to keep it as entertaining and educational as I can. But yeah, it's, if I truly want to answer your question of how I do the things that I do, because I don't feel like I necessarily do more than other people, but do the things that I do, it comes down to having right kind of support. So my wife is very supportive. I have a business partner who's extremely diligent, and I have people around me that I can bounce ideas off of. Before I did the 30-second eye doc thing, I shot a message to a few friends saying, I have this idea, what do you think? And I have the trust that they will give me their blunt very honest feedback. And so if they say that's a completely ridiculous idea, I'll rethink it. I might still do it, but I'll rethink it, but also then, like I was saying, not having so much inhibition and doing a bunch of things. And a lot of times I will push a limit. I'll realize, okay, I did too much, and I'll kind of come back a little bit. And I find that I can keep my plate pretty full, comfortably full, if I learn how much I'm able to keep on it. I think, when I speak with some friends and other people who want to do things, they're either inhibiting themselves for some reason, or they think their plate is full already, and it might be, or they're not willing to sort of put a little extra on their plate and see if it fits. So I think those are the reasons that I'm doing as many different things that I'm doing right now.
Well, and I think you said, in the introduction, as I mentioned, that one of your passions is to make sure that you're educating others. And for those that don't know what the 30-second eye doc is, are these little 30-second spots that you do on Instagram. I don't know if you do them anywhere else, but I am seeing them quite a bit on Instagram, which is awesome. And they always make me smile. And it's just one little topic, some sort of eye care topic that you're educating your patients with. And you even do a kind of a neat little, because of course, as a video editor, I love this stuff. You do this neat little treatment to it, which keeps our attention. And again, if you say 30-second, we know, hey, I can spend 30 seconds looking at one of these spots. So, they're entertaining, but they are educational. So absolutely love that. And it goes right to what you mentioned. Do talk about, I think, the fact that it's a milestone, the 50th episode, but what a powerful episode it was. And so maybe first of all, dig deep in how you got started with the podcast. We've got a lot of great colleagues out there that are doing some amazing podcasts. Tell us what motivated you. What was the why? What was the how of getting started with it? Give us a little backstory on the podcast. And then if you can, go ahead and tell us about that very special episode.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always very happy to talk about Harnarayan and his journey. And he shared some amazing insights during that episode. But to kind of take you back to the beginning of the podcast, so I listen to a lot of podcasts myself. I think that's sort of a natural starting point to the whole thing. But one person that I listened to or watched a lot over a few years back. Since then, I've kind of dropped off a little bit. Is Gary V. If you're familiar with him, if everybody out there is,
sure.
Yeah, so he's like the ultimate, or like the very, like one of the biggest first sort of social media type entrepreneurs, although he was clearly being an entrepreneur before, but he really leveraged social media, whether it was YouTube or now Instagram or whatever, to build his wealth. And, he can be a bit abrasive or in your face. And I think I only had a certain amount of tolerance for his message, but he to his credit, he says, he repeats the same message. He sticks to his guns, and he kind of gives the same message over and over, maybe in different sort of ways. But one of the things I heard him say over and over was like, well, look, if you're trying to network, if you're trying to build a brand, one of the best ways, if not the best way, is to start a podcast. And one thing I was doing at that time on social media was talking about building a brand, personal brand for yourself, and the value in that for optometrists. So I was, talking to my colleagues through social media about the value of building a brand and how it can be leveraged, whether it's in a clinical setting or in a industry, speaking, lecturing, or other ways, creating business opportunities for yourself. I even, developed a COPE approved lecture that I was doing at conferences based around that, building a brand and using social media. And so ultimately, I was like, well, the one piece that's missing from my brand is a podcast. The other thing that was happening at the same time, and I don't really talk about this all that much, although I've mentioned it a few times more recently in social media, is that I actually 4 or 5 years ago started my own e-commerce eyewear brand, which is called Oxford & Kin. And I was doing that a lot behind the scenes for different reasons, but while I was trying to build that brand, I was networking with some amazing people as I was trying to get influencers and so on, whether they were TV personalities, athletes, business people, whatever it might be, just online social media influencers. I was just networking with all these people. Every week I was talking to someone and learning from them. And it was helping me build the eyewear brand, but it was also helping me build my personal brand. And then on the other end, I was getting messages from students or new grads, or even just my colleagues, peers, about, how did you do this, or how did you do that, and how can I learn to do this? Can you help me get this thing off the ground? And I was like, I see a disconnect here. I'm talking to these established people who are really successful. I have the pleasure, luxury of talking to them. And on the other hand, I have the honor of having people reach out to me to, learn from me, or, see if they can get some kind of mentorship from me. I was thinking I should bring those two groups of people together. And I felt like the podcast was the way for me to bring the stories from those successful people to those other people who were asking me questions. And so the first batch of podcasts that I did first, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 podcasts, were primarily people I was working with behind the scenes for the eyewear brand, who were successful people who were helping me build that. And so I had the ability to bring some pretty good, successful people on the podcast that, if I hadn't been doing the eyewear brand and I had just as an optometrist started a podcast, there's no chance I was going to be able to bring them on, or even connect with them. So I had the luxury of doing that. So that's where it all started. That was sort of the inception of it. And like I was telling you earlier, I kind of had this goal of hitting 50 episodes because I've just felt like that was going to be a number where I was going to be comfortable finally in my own skin, my own sort of hosting, presenting skin. And it actually did almost take me like 50 episodes to get comfortable. I'm a little jittery sometimes on my podcast, especially on the introduction, and I trip up here and there, and I used to get stressed about it, but now I laugh at myself on air. I'll just be like, I did it again. I'll do it again next time. It's not a big deal.
But people love that. They love that. And I've listened, and that's not true. You don't listen, folks. It's not true. He sounds great. He sounds like a pro. You've been doing this forever.
But I love it. And the podcast has just become something that I truly like. It's a passion for me. I love doing it. Anything that has any kind of video editing related to it, whether it's the 30-second eye doc videos, whether it's the podcast, or previously I used to do my YouTube videos. I love doing that. I can get totally consumed in it. But the podcast has really become something that I love doing. But like I was telling you earlier, if somebody's starting a podcast, I think it's really important for them to establish any venture like that that's going to take a lot of your time. Is how do you want to approach it? Do you want this to be, are you going to be super consistent every week? You're going to put out a podcast and it's going to become like a job for you to do that, right? So, I've wonderful friends and colleagues who put out amazing podcasts, and they do it, like the Four Eyes podcast, for example. Those ladies put out great content, and they, every Wednesday, when they're in their season, every Wednesday you can count, they're going to have a podcast. You can count on it. I knew I wasn't going to be able to be that consistent because I have, a family and business and other things that I was prioritizing over the podcast. So I told myself not to stress. Sometimes I'm putting out a podcast every week. Sometimes I might not put one out for a month, and I'm not pressuring myself to change that, because that way I can continue to do it as a passion and enjoy doing it. There are benefits to doing it the other way. You get more traction if you can do it regularly and have the consistency. But I was willing to sacrifice that for maintaining my sort of love for everything I was doing around it. So it's really important for people to establish that beforehand.
I think that's so important. As marketers, and you're a marketer as well, we would say, yes, consistency is king, and or content is king, consistency is queen. But it's again, I did a podcast and I only got through 20 episodes, and I think I'm in the majority. I think there's a statistic out there that says that most podcasters only get to about 20 episodes before they stop. So the first thing with, and you work with, because it's wonderful and you're passionate about it. And I think the other interesting thing about your podcast is it isn't just about eyes. It is about entrepreneurship. It is about a lot of different things that will keep us engaged. And you're showing that you do have a broader interest. Do tell us about this one episode, the 50th, and then give us some insight into maybe some of the other kind of episodes you have. For sure.
So this guest that I had, Harnarayan Singh, is he's a play-by-play announcer for NHL hockey games, and he's doing it at the absolute highest, most nationally televised level, right? So it's not some local broadcast on a small channel, although that is part of his journey. It's the, for anybody who doesn't follow hockey, it's sort of the equivalent of a Sunday night football or a Monday night football broadcast. It's the one broadcast that it's different here because there's 2 games on, one after the other. So it's like Sunday night football with 2 games, but he's doing one of those games. So the entire country is tuned into this one game,
Wow.
from coast to coast. Everybody's watching the same game because that's the one that's on hockey night in Canada on Saturday night. And he's doing,
Wow.
he may not be doing it every week, but he's one of the main core, I don't know, 3 or 4 play-by-play announcers that they have. And so he's at the absolute peak of this. And the cool thing is, that was his dream as a child when he was only 4 years old. He used to run around the house with his little karaoke thing, the microphone with the little speaker attached to it. And he would turn the volume off on the TV, and he would call the game on his little karaoke device. And he always said he wanted to be on Hockey Night in Canada. But of course, back then in whatever the 80s and 90s, there was nobody on TV that looked like him, which was, he's Indian, Punjabi, Sikh. So he's, beard and turban, and he's born in Canada, raised in Canada, but he's very true to his faith, and he's very religious. And there was nobody on TV looked like him. So but he still pursued this dream and kept following the path of journalism and broadcast journalism, and along the way everybody kept telling him, well, you could do the news maybe, because there's some diversity in doing news, but not in sports. In sports, people who look like you, and it wasn't subtle, it was pretty blunt, like people who look like you usually work behind the camera. But he kind of kept pursuing it, and this opportunity out of total thin air came around where they decided to create a broadcast that was a bit more local, a bit more niche, where they would do they would take the show, the game that was going to be televised, and they would have these guys do Punjabi announce play-by-play over top of it, and they would play it on the local network, not on the big national broadcast. So for me in Vancouver, I would have to find the channel that would be the equivalent of that network here, and we could watch it if we wanted to, but it's not the one that's on the one channel. So anyways, he did that for years, and stuck with it and did really well. And he lives in Calgary, which is in Western Canada, and the CBC hub is in Toronto, which is in Eastern Canada. It's sort of the equivalent of living in, not quite in Seattle, but somewhere like that, and the broadcast being out in Chicago, or pretty much in New York. And so they weren't paying him to do this, but he knew this was the opportunity he wanted to do. So he decided, I'm going to do whatever it takes. He just said yes. They offered it to him. He just said yes. And then he's like, I'll figure the rest out later, which is kind of my mantra as well. Yes. And so he would fly out, take a red-eye flight on a Friday night. He would get into Toronto early Saturday morning. He would do his prep. He would call the games Saturday night, and they would end usually quite late on a Saturday night, East Coast, probably close to midnight. And then he would just cab it back to the airport, find a bench, park out there for 4 or 5 hours until the first flight left back to Calgary. And he'd get to Calgary around 7, 8 in the morning, 8, 9 in the morning. And because he was so true to his faith, he would drive straight to the temple, because Sunday is the big, the big religious day, and everybody goes to the temple. And he would go to the temple with pretty much no sleep. And he actually is also, on top of all of this, a world-class musician, and so he would play different hymns and music at the temple that day. People would be waiting for him to do that, and then Monday morning he would go back to his regular day job. So he did that for 3 years, where he flew, slept on a bench, came back, and eventually they're like, okay, you're doing such a good job, let's pay for your flights, or let's pay for your hotel. And ultimately then this opportunity just this year for him to move over to the big broadcast. Just truly amazing, the amount of work he put in and his work ethic. But on top of that, then the overt racism that he experienced as a child, as a teenager, even just now, when he ended up on now he's on the big English broadcast, he's getting tweets and emails about, cut your beard off and take your turban off. And, I don't want my announcements coming from a guy who looks like this. And he gets that regularly, to be able to.
So even today's time. Yeah.
Even today. Absolutely. And so to manage that, to somehow let that go and continue to do your job at the level that he's doing it, truly amazing and inspiring.
It is. I mean, he knew what he wanted to do. And from that, like you said, from a young age, and he did whatever it took. he absolutely made it happen. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what other kind of topics do you have? I want people to go ahead and go over to your podcast, the 2020
Hmm.
podcast, and
Yeah, please.
give us maybe a another, because again, it's more than just eyes, and I know you do talk about that, but
Yeah.
just what other entrepreneurial issues do you talk about?
Sure. I would say it's probably 50-50. I'd say 50%
Okay.
eye care. But even within eye care, I like to talk about varieties of it's less clinical. There's very little clinical type of stuff in the podcast. I do probably have 2 or 3 in there that are a bit more clinically based. But the other half is, I've had a few professional athletes. I've had multiple entrepreneurs, business owners. That's kind of the point of the podcast is to share stories from different backgrounds and bring that to our industry, to our colleagues, so we can start to think a little bit outside the box. And maybe, I found this for myself when I heard a story that somebody in a completely different industry was sharing. I was like, wow, there's a lot of parallels actually, right?
Yeah.
Even though you're talking about who knows what, whatever. Actually, a friend of mine, Allie Armstrong, who's one of the early episodes, she's a wedding planner, and she puts
Mm-hmm.
on one of the biggest wedding shows in Vancouver, one of the biggest luxury wedding shows in
Wow.
Vancouver. And she was talking about a lot of the struggles that she went through. I was like, well, I've been through some of those, or like on a different level, or I know people in our industry go through. But if you see it from her angle, you might be able to apply a different solution to your current problem
Right.
in this industry, and we can all grow from that. And that was really the goal of the podcast. And we realized that we're not in it alone. We're not the only ones struggling. We're not the only ones who've thought we had everything and then lost everything and then came back to kind of build it up again. There's so many other people who've done it. And if we hear enough of those stories, it'll inspire us to keep pushing forward. That's really the goal of the podcast.
Fantastic. I love it. Absolutely. And business is business. I mean, that's
100%.
something that when you do open up a practice, you realize that. Tell us too about, we had a nice conversation before coming on about what you learned through COVID. Tell us some of the struggles and some of the blessings that happened through that. Because I know that we talked about that a little bit.
Sandy, it cut out for a second there on my
Oh, okay. Sorry. The struggles and some of the blessings through COVID.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, it's a touchy topic, COVID, in so many ways, right? But
It is.
there's the obvious struggles, and I feel for people who have been through really, really difficult times due to COVID, whether it's their physical health, their mental health, or their business side of things, whatever it might be. I know there's a lot of people who've struggled in a lot of ways, and for me, the biggest thing initially was we had to shut down. Everybody shut down their business, and there was total uncertainty of what was going to happen. I realized well after the fact that I was feeling anxiety. Like I probably knew it at the time, but I was sort of shrugging it off, and I was trying to be productive. I was trying to put on webinars or record IG lives or podcasts or other things and try to find revenue streams. I was just keeping myself busy, really busy, as well as family time during that shutdown period. But it wasn't until we came back to work and things somewhat normalized that I was like, wow, I was pretty stressed for those 2 months when I really should have just let go and relaxed. That could have been, I did get to spend a lot of time with family, which was great, and my wife and I tried lots of different recipes and cooking and different things like that, which was cool. But it wasn't until more recently, last 6 months or whatever, few months, that I realized it's actually really nice to have a pretty empty schedule. Like I come to work and I go home, and that's most of my life, and
Sure.
I can do a few other extra projects here and there. I don't have all the other obligations that I used to have prior to COVID, where pretty much every day after work, I was running to some networking thing or some business thing or something for Oxford and Kin, where I had an opportunity to make some sales. I wasn't having to do all of those different things anymore. And initially it felt like anxiety. And then I started to understand it and become conscious of it. And then I started to really appreciate that I don't have any of that. And now I can be really conscious of where I put my time and energy. And those times, those empty spaces where I used to get anxious thinking, wow, I got to do something to be productive.
Right.
I try to absorb myself in that. And I find that it's actually helping me to be more productive in the things that I'd like to do. I'm more productive and more just better at the podcast. I have more ideas come to me for the 30-second iDoc videos, or, just all of this that other times it wouldn't come to me because those empty spaces would be filled with, okay, I got to get this next thing done. I got to get this next thing done. Things are starting to finally open up for us here. In fact, tomorrow, July 1st, most of all the restrictions are going away for us. So we're almost back to completely normal. Restaurants are fully open. Mask mandates are pretty much gone tomorrow. A lot of stuff like that's going to be gone. So people are going to start saying, all right, let's start doing these meetings, and industry is going to start saying, okay, Harbir, come speak for us at this dinner and that dinner, and so on. And I'm a little anxious about that now, to be honest with you. I'm going to be like, you know what, I'll do one of those a month maybe. I'd like to just have my time to myself to
Sure.
to have my mental kind of sanity and comfort back the way I've had it lately. It's been nice.
I think a lot of us have felt pretty much the same way. We realize we're kind of reprioritizing, and like you said, that downtime, I think, increases our creativity. We need it. And just for so long, like you said, rush. We think that that's the way that we're supposed to be. Otherwise, we feel guilty about it. So, but so what would you tell other optometrists who have the same kind of entrepreneurial ambitions that you've had? How would you recommend they get involved, or what kind of tips do you give to some of those young folks that have come to you and asked you for some support? Any sort of generic, I know I'm kind of throwing a sort of a big generic line out there, but whether it's business or creative or.
I think the first thing, the first thing, so somebody recently, I think it was on my podcast, they said, don't be afraid. I think it's okay to be afraid, but I think it's good to kind of remove what I said earlier in the beginning of the interview here, is to remove a lot of those inhibitions somehow, sort of train yourself to just take the first step. And it's okay if you're a little scared. It's probably a good thing that you're a little bit scared, but just somehow taking that first step is always the most important thing in any endeavor. Now, surrounding yourself with the right people is probably, in my mind, maybe the second most important thing. So years and years ago, I wanted to make YouTube videos. All I could think about on my drive to and from work, and before I went to sleep, and I was like, I have these ideas. I want to make these educational but entertaining YouTube videos. I call them For Your Eyes Only. And I had one night in my sleep, I came up with the idea of having a counterpart, my alter ego. I called him Dr. Einstein, Dr. EYE, I'm Einstein. And like, I did it. I didn't do it. I had the idea, and I kept telling my wife, we weren't married at the time, but I kept telling her over and over, I want to make these videos, but I kept making the excuse of, I don't have a good camera to record.
Right.
I don't have a good camera. And so that year for my birthday, she bought me a nice digital camera. And so she's like, okay, now you can shut up, just do it. Let's stop telling me about it, just go do it. And so to have people like that around you, and again, like, I'm blessed that she's been extraordinarily supportive in so many different ways. I've said this over and over to so many people. She knows when to give me a kick in the ass or to like use more gentle touch. More often than not, it's the kick in the ass that I need, but she knows which one's which and when it's needed, and kind of how to kind of encourage me. And so that's been super, super helpful. So having that, somebody who can encourage you also, so to help you get through that initial hump. I got the video camera, immediately started making the videos, and it was like amazing. I loved making those videos. They just took too much time out of my day, especially when I started having a family. But try to remove the inhibitions, have good people around you who can support you. I have one very small core group of friends, 3 or 4 people who I can go to, I was mentioning earlier, and I know when they give me some feedback, I know it's the genuine truth. They're not going to sugarcoat it. And then consistency is kind of the key thing. I'm sure, we've touched on it a bit, but we'll talk more, but consistently putting out the content on a regular basis is probably the most important thing you can do. It doesn't have to be, what did you say earlier? Done is better than perfect, right? So it doesn't have to be perfect. Absolutely. And in fact, sometimes you may have to put out something where you're like, I'm not like super happy with it, but It's better to just get it out there, to be consistent, to let people know that you're going to be there for them, to continue to show them the content that you want to show them. Years ago, I had the chance to meet a pretty big YouTuber, YouTube star,
YouTuber.
YouTuber. His name is Just Rain, and he's these YouTubers. They just make quirky videos, and they become like they do it. Some of their videos, you're like, what is that? Right? But I met him, and I was like, hey man, I make these optometry related YouTube videos, and he wanted to laugh. I could tell. He's like, oh, okay. And I was like, dude, what is the number one thing you would say, like, if I want to try to really make a mark? He's like, consistency. Number one, no matter what, consistency. Right? You said content is king, consistency is queen. You can't have consistency without the content, right? So they're kind of the one and the same almost.
Right.
It's putting it out regularly, over and over and over and over again. And eventually, like I was telling you earlier, people just start to see you as like, almost like this institution, like you've always been in their life, because you're just consistently present, and you start to come up. They start to think of you when they have an idea, or they start to think of you when they think of someone they want to refer for something. So, don't be afraid, or be afraid, but still, have the courage to kind of step forward and take the first step. Don't be afraid to look silly. I can't tell you how many times I've done things where I just look like a complete fool. But I don't know why. I don't even know. No, I'm telling you the truth. I don't know why I put my hand up to do it anyways. I'm like, I know I'm going to look like an idiot, but you do it, and you don't feel so bad after, or like you fail at it, but it's okay. But because you did it, you have the courage to do something else next time. I've gotten up on stage in front of hundreds of people and made a fool of myself because I didn't even know what I was putting my hand up for. There was like, we just need volunteers. Right. Okay, I'm up, I'm coming. And then they're like, act like a unicorn.
We're going to put prism on your eyes.
Yeah, do some stupid thing. And I was like, oh man, okay, here I go. But you just do it. And you might look silly. I'd started the eyewear brand, and I put it out there into the public, and I told my family and friends about it, and had to take the criticism or whatever the feedback might have been from certain people, and know that everybody's watching, but still do whatever I could to make it grow. You just got to be willing to put yourself out there and do it. That's the most important thing in any kind of entrepreneurial thing is just get out there and do it. Always.
And be real. I mean, be yourself. That's absolutely all of those things. And I know when you're talking about vulnerability, and Brene Brown has an entire institution based on that. Mm-hmm. And, we see other people as being incredibly brave when we see how vulnerable they are, but yet we're so afraid to look vulnerable because we think it's going to be horrible, but it's not. We need to see that, because we need to see the humanity. We need to see that, those perfect photos that are on Instagram. Mm-hmm. It sometimes it causes depression and mm-hmm. More severe mental issues, because people believe that that's how people really live. So as soon as we get to really know people and see that, no, you're just like me, I'm just like you, it just, that connection is made. That's why I'm doing these interviews. I want people to see how we are and what we're doing, what we're up to, and besides what we're seeing, on social media. So I really appreciate it. And just the sure.
Oh yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, to show that consistency really works, I popped up another rock star, Dr. Christy Wynn, that I just interviewed, and she's talking about you being a rock star, and so it's and the same thing that we talked about is we're both seen as experts simply because we're not afraid. I mean, we are afraid. This is not something that's always comfortable for me, but we think about, I am serving the audience. People want to know about us. They want to learn about us. So if I don't do this, is someone else going to do it? I don't know. So that's sort of that driving for me. That's my why is I want other people to really get to know, make those connections, because my podcast was actually called Making All the Right Connections. And I like that. I believe wholeheartedly in that. And it's important to see that we're just people like everybody else. So.
But it's hard to, it's taken me a long time to get to a point where I can share those things. I don't feel like I've done anything like to its completion. I'm still very much in the process. In fact, I feel like I'm in the early stages of everything I'm trying to do. And in the beginning, you try really hard, like not to show people that you're almost, faking it till you make it kind of thing. You don't want to see,
Right.
you don't want people to see the background. You don't want people to see the messy stuff. You don't want them to see that you're stressing. But after you've been doing it long enough, you're like, well, what else is there if you don't want them to see that? That's what the process is all about. And if you can enjoy that process, it's very cliche, but it truly comes down to understanding that it's not like a magic thing that all of a sudden you're successful and wealthy and amazing, or
Right.
whatever it is. And I think it's so now I feel comfortable to be at a point where I can tell people, like, dude, it's not all, sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of like stress. There's a lot of other stuff that comes with it. I'm constantly scrambling. In fact, actually, my good friend Solomon Gold said to me today, we were talking, and he said, we were talking about presenting, like lecturing and things like that. And he's like, there's two types of people, two types of presenters. The first type is stressing before every presentation. They're always anxious. They're anxious before every presentation, no matter how many they've done. They're always anxious before every presentation, and they're nervous. They want to make sure they get it done perfectly. And the second type are liars, and those are the two types of, because everybody is like that, And if you
Right.
if you're trying to tell people that you're somehow just perfect in every aspect, and like this comes super easy to you, get out of here. Like there are some people who are
Right. They
talented
don't
and
align with you.
they're maybe they are better at it. But what I came to learn is everything comes with practice. Everything comes with experience. Everything comes with failure as part of the process. It's just all part of the package.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And what is it? Something like 95% of people would rather die than present. So
Yeah, that's a crazy
absolutely. It is. Oh man. So, well, tell us lastly, how can we support you? What would you like everybody to see? Obviously, please go to the 2020 podcast and go visit your YouTube channel that we're scrolling at the bottom.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to ask of my community, my audience, and your audience?
Yeah, definitely the podcast, of course. Thank you for that, for sharing that. Yeah, you can find it on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify, and you can watch the full episodes on YouTube. Sometimes the easiest way to find it is by actually searching my name versus the 2020 podcast. Last year it was hard because it was an election year, and anytime you search 2020, anything election related. But this year I think it's a little easier if you actually search the name. But if you don't find it, just search my name. So thank you for that. I think the other thing I'd love to share with you, which you had mentioned in my bio in the intro, was there's a new venture that I'm really blessed to be part of, which is called the Lensbox Foundation. And it's a brand new foundation charitable organization, and I'm the executive director. So I'll be leading, most of the actual things that we're doing with it. And we have three main mandates. They're pretty big things, so we're going to try to focus on one and kind of build the others over time. But number one is outreach eye care services. So providing eye care to marginalized communities and rural communities that don't have access to care around British Columbia here. We'll probably start with some Indigenous communities and kind of go from that. The second one is to help reduce the environmental impact of the eye care industry.
Oh, wow.
So, trying to establish some initiatives, whether they're recycling, whether there's some other ways to reduce waste, or, improve sort of our footprint, in one way or another.
Sure.
And the third one, which I think we're likely going to put a bit more focus on in the beginning, is to provide mental health resources to eye care professionals and their staff, and possibly even their patients. So if you have somebody, whether it's yourself as a doctor, whether it's somebody on your staff, or perhaps you see a patient who you feel could benefit from some resources, whether it's counseling or just some education, whatever, we're actually setting up a platform where we're setting up a program with an organization that does this counseling and outreach and type of stuff that's specifically for mental health. They already have a very well-established program in multiple, whether it's for drug abuse or alcohol abuse, or domestic or whatever trauma, all sorts of. They have all these different programs already established, but we're going to establish a separate one that's just for eye care providers. So we'll create a portal, and if anybody feels like they think they could benefit from this, they would just go online, click, and enter their name, and they would establish a connection, and it'd be done through the foundation. And so we're trying to help maybe subsidize some of the costs involved, and or whatever can help break down some of those barriers, educate people. That's what we want to do through there. So those are the main things that we're going to be doing. So right now there's not a whole lot tangible. It's very close to kind of becoming like live and out in the public, but just so everybody's aware of it, when you see it coming out, please check it out. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I'll be happy to give you more information.
So will there be a website for that? I mean, it may not be ready yet, but there, okay.
Yeah, it's already up, the lensboxfoundation.org. I should. It's been under construction.
We'll drop it in the. It's okay. We'll drop it in the comments. Don't worry about it.
There's a landing page there already. But
okay,
again,
good.
Find me on. And the other thing, find me on Instagram at harbirsian.od, and I'm always there to
yes.
connect with people.
Yes, I'll definitely. We can do. We'll do all of that right after the show. That's a lot. I mean, just that you say, "Oh, I'm not doing a whole lot." That's just that platform alone. That's huge. I mean, that's all three of those arms of what you're doing with that that could be a full-time job for sure. So congratulations on that. That's a huge undertaking. Wow. So, but man, thank you so much, Harbir. Thank you for sharing your stories. I'm so grateful to have you on the show, and for your unwavering commitment and leadership in educating the community at large on how to maintain proper eye health and live their best lives with great vision. You have certainly made a tremendous impact on me and on our profession as a whole. So for now, that's a wrap, everybody. Thanks for joining us, whether you're live or on the replay. I'm your host, Dr. Sandy Eveleth, your eye care marketing OD. I'm a certified master marketer, a certified digital business consultant, and I love helping eye care professionals maximize profits with premium specialty patients through one-on-one coaching. So if you'd like to book an innovative strategic marketing session, just come on over to drsandyeleth.com. Book Dr. Sandy. And on that note, we will see you next time.